because mind, in the sense of what my 100 billion neurons are doing, can affect the body, because the brain's connected to the spinal cord, which is connected to the hand. So I don't think that mind and brain or mind and body are separate in the sense of not being able to interact. But I don't think there's anything called mind that somehow floats free of the brain.
Cardston, is that Alberta, Canada?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hi. Did I lose you?
No, you're there. Go ahead.
Okay. I have a question about the colonization of language, because I'm working on the Blood Indian Reserve in southern Alberta, where Blackfoot was the original language. Children were kidnapped and forced to speak English under stress. And now we're at a point where the language is in danger, the original language is in danger. And I'm wondering if there's any specific sort of sociolinguistic crossover, science, social science aspects that you're familiar with regarding that colonization process and then the recovery of the original language in terms of influences. Thank you. I'll hang up now.
Yes, it's a very pressing issue for linguistics, because our subject matter is disappearing. There are estimated to be about 6,000 languages spoken on Earth today, and at least half of them are endangered in the sense of they probably won't last another few decades. How do we know that? Well, all the people who speak them are in their 70s or 80s, and this is certainly true of many Native American and First Nation Canadian languages. It could be that as many as 90% of them go extinct. That still leaves 600 languages. It's not as if everyone's going to end up speaking English or Chinese, but it still is a scientific tragedy and a cultural tragedy, because each language is this exquisite, like a work of art, like a species, and each language also is the medium by which a culture is transmitted. It's often language is a repository of a lot of humor, imagery, metaphor. On the other hand, many languages have gone extinct because of coercive policies of governments such as Australia, Canada, and the US. Although, to be honest, a lot of them are doomed regardless of what government policy is, simply because nowadays we're becoming more interconnected. Opportunity lies in mastering the language of the majority country, and there's less incentive of keeping these languages alive. And I'm as guilty as anyone, like many grandchildren of immigrants. My grandparents survived speaking Yiddish. My parents spoke it not as well as my grandparents, at least in the case of my mother. I don't speak it at all. Why? Well, I don't really need Yiddish to survive. I'm sorry that I didn't learn it, but the way I grew up gave me few opportunities to learn it, and that's an experience that is replicated worldwide. So I think what we can do is certainly do our best to document these languages before they vanish forever. They're useful not just to linguists, but even to archaeologists and anthropologists and historians, tracing the history of migrations of peoples, for whom language is often the best set of evidence, kind of fossil evidence of where people have been and who they've interacted with. We know that the Gypsies, for example, or the Roma, as they're now called, originated in India because their language, Romani, is closely tied to Indian languages. The other thing is, of course, to not get in the way of efforts by people to speak and preserve their own languages, to assist them in keeping it alive if there are the numbers and if there is the commitment to do so.
Allenson, Michigan. One more call, then we'll take a break. Go ahead. Allenson, you're on the air. Please go ahead.
Hello. What I wanted to ask Professor Pinker was if his books cover, since I've not read his books, but I have listened to him on television a number of times and am planning to read him. I read an article years ago by Douglas Hofstadter in which he explores mental chunking and what he calls triggerable analogies. And I found it fascinating. And I'm wondering, I'm sure that Professor Pinker has covered these ideas that it's actually analogy that makes thought and reasoning possible and not the other way around. And I'm wondering which of his books he would recommend that I read to learn more about this. And then I have a second quick question, which is, what does he do for fun that doesn't involve a great deal of thought?
Mental chunking, huh?
Mental chunking. Yes, I'm very sympathetic to the suggestion from Douglas Hofstadter, and in fact I'm engaged in a research project right now with my graduate student, James Lee, on analogical reminding, a phenomenon that Hofstadter himself documented and that I've experienced a lot, and write about in my most recent book, The Stuff of Thought, that has an extensive discussion of the role of analogy in human thought. We talked about it a little bit in discussing unconscious metaphor. So the first person who said he attacked my argument must have been struck by what a verbal disagreement has in common with a physical assault. Namely, in both cases, there's a conflict of goals, there's an action by one party that in some way works to the disadvantage of another, it can be defended against, and so on. And so that must have shaped our language when the word attack and defend got transferred from the realm of warfare to the realm of argument. What is the mental process that allows that to happen? Well, that kind of leap must be something that happened to someone at a particular time and then eventually gets contagious and spreads through the language. So I've been trying to figure out how often these leaps occur to people. And I started just by studying myself, as many psychologists do, and I noticed that every once in a while, out of nowhere, one experience would remind me of another that have nothing in common in terms of their sensory experience. It's not like Marcel Proust writing about sipping the lime tea and being time transported back to his childhood when he sipped the lime tea. These are cases of reminding where the similarity is purely by analogy. So I'll give you an example. I go jogging, I have my iPod, lots of songs in the iPod, some of them are slow, some of them are fast. Of course, when you jog, you want something with the right tempo. So, and you can't both jog and select songs at the same time. So I let the iPod pick the song, and if it's the wrong tempo, I just skip over it. I go skip, skip, skip. Then there's one that I can jog to. Immediately I thought of how in baseball the pitcher and catcher communicate by the catcher signaling pitches with finger signs, and then the pitcher shaking them off until he gets one that he likes. Now, that's, in one sense, it's a bizarre association. What does songs on an iPod have to do with throwing pitches? On the other hand, there is a very deep commonality between them, namely a case in which you can't directly pick something that you want, you wait for a selection, and you reject them until you get the one that you want. Somehow, my brain categorized those two experiences in terms of that analogy that they share. And I do agree with Douglas Hofstadter that that is a very important mental process in allowing us to come to scientific discoveries, literary metaphors, figures of speech like argument is war that then enrich the language. And I'm trying to find out how often and how easily it happens and to which people.
And what do you do for fun?
Oh, what do I do for fun? Yes, aside from jogging with an iPod. I like I do a lot of reading. Well, I guess that counts as doing stuff with your mind. I like outdoor activity that involves getting from one place to another on people power. I like hiking. I like bicycling, mountain biking, tandem biking, road biking. I like kayaking. I like jogging. So anything where you do some exercise and scenery goes by. Enjoy.
And after our break, we're going to take a look at some of your photography.
Oh, and photography.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with many more of your phone calls.
For me, a good day of writing is one where I can do it absolutely intensively, from right after breakfast until I go to bed, with a break for exercise, especially if it's a nice day, spending some time with Rebecca, my wife. But otherwise, I like to work intensely. I can't work on a book just an hour or two a day. I find that I have to have a bunch of ideas in the air at the same time, kind of like a juggler. And then if I have to put them down and get them all up in the air again, then it's quite disruptive. And for that reason, I like to write every day, all day, for weeks or months at a time, whenever I can get away with it. I'm not much of a